about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. This broadcast is being brought to you live on Monday morning, January 12th, 2015. It's now about 8:01 a.m. Central Time in what was once known as the good old USA. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government, now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action, only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. During our live broadcast, we invite you to call 646-652-4620 or toll-free 888-773-4496. Before we get started, I would also like to remind our listeners to subscribe to our reminder service by visiting our website and clicking on the subscribe icon. For those of you who tweet, my Twitter address is @LibertyJoe. Now on to our show. Well, good morning, everyone. This morning we have with us the author of the book, Secession. His name is Jonathan Bartlett. He's been on my program before, a couple of years ago, right, Jonathan?
I don't think it was that long ago, but yeah.
About maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. Over at KFAQ, right, at that time. He wrote a book on Secession. It's a fascinating book, and we're going to go through it, and I think we'll learn a lot by it. I've read it more than once because there's so much information. And what I like about the book, that it's practical. It's not theoretical. It's not something that it's impossible to do. It's something everyone can do to improve their position in this very, very tumultuous economy that we have today. Jonathan, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is a great operation you have. I'm excited to be on.
Thank you.
The one thing, another thing I want to say about the book is that it's not about electing people, right? Because we always think that we're gonna fix things by electing just the right guy, and I think that's one of the ways that we kind of get stuck is that we're like, oh well, we'll wait for the next 4 years before we fix anything now.
Yeah.
And I just get so tired of that. I'm like, why are we gonna wait to fix things? And the thing is that we can fix ourselves right now. I might not be able to do anything about the guy who's in the Oval Office, and I might not be able to do anything about any of the options for the guy in the Oval Office. But I can do things right here and right now with myself, my family, and my community that can fix things where I live, or at least make them better.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're seceding from that line of thinking then, right? You're
exactly.
saying, I'm seceding from the thinking that, well, when we get a new president and that president is of the party of my choice, things will all be fine. The sun will come out, the flowers will bloom, and everyone will be happy, right?
Right. And even if we got the right guy. And first of all, there is no right guy. I just want to say that out loud. There isn't a right guy. This is not, fixing our country is not something that one guy can do. It takes all of us. And I think that's one of the mysterious evils of the political process is that we vest fixing the country in all these other people. And I don't think they could do it even if they did everything right. It still takes us.
That's right. It's strange, and I'm afraid I'm going to go off on a tangent, but I just want to make this comment. This morning when I was getting ready to come to the studio, I saw a little documentary on television, and it showed film clips of Kennedy and Reagan. Mm-hmm. Now, they weren't perfect and all that, and they were basically part of the system. But I stood there, I said, although they were part of the system, they were so superior to what we have had recently with the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas. I said, it's a shame. I mean, if I was them, I wouldn't want to not be categorized in the same way, the same category. I want to be part of the same club, because it seemed that at least they had some ideology that they made known, and they pressed for it. Now, the way they got their way may have been something that we don't want to know about.
Yeah.
But especially Kennedy. Today, Kennedy would be an ultra-radical conservative, you know. And I said, you know, it was almost refreshing watching those two gentlemen, because in relative terms to what we have today, it's just nauseating.
Yeah, and you know, the especially I can't stand the thought of that we'll have another Bush running.
Oh, you know, Jeb Bush.
Yeah, I mean I'm sick about that. I mean, it's we do not have a hereditary monarchy. At least I didn't think we did.
Yeah.
It's possible I was wrong.
Yeah.
Now Kennedy was somewhat of a hereditary monarch.
That's right.
But he at least it seemed I didn't live in that. I was not alive during that time. But at least looking back, it seems like he was at least for the people that he was over. And then Reagan was actually a man of the people, and ruled as if he was a person of the people.
Yeah.
And since then, we really haven't had anyone.
Yeah. I was in Europe when Jack Kennedy. I didn't know he was going to be there, but I actually met Jack Kennedy in Naples, Italy.
Wow.
And didn't touch him. I mean, we were just yards away from each other, and then I yelled at him, and I said hello to him, and he said hello back. But when I was in Europe and Kennedy was there, Europe closed down. I mean, they just loved him. I mean, if you did something wrong and a policeman stopped you, all you had to do is say, Kennedy, they let you go. I mean, I'm not kidding you. They loved him. And because of his, not only his demeanor, but his policies. What was interesting is that when you compare Kennedy with Obama, you go to Europe today and mention Obama, you get yourself shot, thrown in jail. And it's such a different world. Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent. Tell me, what was your inspiration? Was there any particular inspiration for this book? Why you? Because I mean, I'd love to write a book, but I never get to write it. You know, people say, you have to write a book, Joe. And I say, oh yeah, I'll do that someday. And I never do. That's got to be a major...
Yeah, so, I mean, it started off just me thinking about things. Like, I spent several years just thinking about, you know, what can I do with my family? And so we bought chickens and raised chickens because, you know, if you produce your own food, then you're not buying the food.
Right.
And so if you don't buy the food, you don't have to earn money to buy the food. And if you don't earn the money to buy the food, you aren't taxed for the money to buy the food.
Right.
And so, you know, and there's these things that I've been trying to just structure my family in a way so that we're not quite so dependent on everything. And then, you know, you start having all the issues with quantitative easing where the government just decides, hey, you know what, we're just going to print a whole ton of money and pretend that the stock market is doing well. And, you know, I thought that, you know, other people need to know this. Other people, you know, I'm not the perfect expert on this, but no one's talking about it. And so, you know, and that happens to me a lot. I wind up with the things where there's important things that I'm not the best authority on it, but other people aren't talking about it.
That's right. It's almost as if we know people who are quite intelligent. In fact, many people I know is a lot smarter than I am.
Yeah.
And yet, when you mention any of these subjects, they look at you like you're weird.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's taboo. You shouldn't touch those subjects. And if you discuss them, well, there's really something wrong with you.
Yeah.
They want to they make you feel there's something wrong with you. So better shut. And it's I don't know how that's been inflicted into our society, but the government couldn't have done a better job if they tried. I mean, because people don't say these things in fear of being ostracized. And no one wants to be, everyone wants to be part of the team, so everyone plays what the popular philosophy is, which is all wrong.
And the other thing is that even when you're going against, you know, like the popular philosophy, or you're going against the New York Times, or you're going, you know, all the time the conservative wing is almost entirely mimicking the left wing.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
because,
yeah.
I mean, I'm a Rush Limbaugh fan, but every time Rush Limbaugh talks, it's almost like he's responding to the New York Times. And you know, there's more to life than just following along with what the New York Times. It's not just that the New York Times is wrong. There's other things that are important in life that we need to be talking about.
That's right.
And you know, and so I almost see that the Republicans and conservatives, you know, they're following along to the same drumbeat, even when they're disagreeing. It's just that they're disagreeing. They're not doing something unique and original. They're just kind of following along and doing so, saying, "Well, I don't agree."
Right. Well, you know, we had talked before about what's missing today is philosophy, critical thinking, in all those sciences, not sciences, but those areas. And it seems to be missing from our school system because when I speak with teachers who have master's degrees, they can regurgitate, but they can't think. Mm-hmm. And it seems that the main talk show hosts don't talk about logic. Mm-hmm. They talk about, well, Senator so-and-so said this, and what he should have said was that. Well, that's garbage because what he said he most likely didn't mean, he was told to say, and he doesn't even know what it means in the first place. And here we are spending our time discussing it when we should be doing things like micro-seceding, right?
Right, exactly.
And I know in this book, the way you have it outlined is you have seceding from the economy, seceding from food supply, healthcare system, education, and then coalescing with your community. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah. So the first thing is seceding from the economy, and you know, obviously we all do wind up with mortgages, or you know, we have to pay taxes, and so you can't totally secede from the economy. But there's a lot of things you can do.
Right.
Basically, what people don't realize is that, you know, our taxes are, if you add them all up, it's, you know, on the low end, it's about 40%.
That's correct.
I mean, that's even if you're not, you don't have to be a rich man to be paying 40% in taxes.
That is correct.
Your tax bracket might say 15%.
Right.
But when you add in everything else that you have to pay, because you have to pay sales tax, you have to pay taxes on your house, you have to pay taxes on the gas you buy. There's all sorts of taxes, and so when you add them all up, you're actually paying about 40% in taxes.
That's right.
The other thing that you have to realize is that if I go to the store and I buy something, when you have 40% in taxes, it means that you actually have to earn 75% more than the price.
That's right.
So, like a $6 coffee, that's almost $10.
That's correct.
And so that's how much money you would have to earn to pay all the taxes and buy the coffee.
That's correct.
So basically, anytime when you participate in that, you're feeding the beast, and you're having to work a lot harder. If you grow your own food, you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to pay any of those people.
Right.
It's your food, and there's nothing that they can do to stop you from it. And you can do that. You can actually grow at least some of your own food, even if you're in an apartment. You can grow. You grow herbs and you know, little pot plants, and you can not pot but potted plants.
Well, another one with potted plants.
So and you can grow mung beans in the dark, and so there's all sorts of things that you can do. And so my goal in the book is just to focus not on what we can't do, but what we can do.
Right.
And the other thing is that so once you realize that, you know, participating in the economic system too much is actually one of the things that's putting us under control. The next thing is realizing that there are things in your community. Living in community is something that we don't talk about a lot. When I grew up, we all were really we were part of a tight-knit neighborhood.
Right.
And we don't have tight-knit neighborhoods as much anymore. And I think that's very sad. Now, I'm kind of a shy, closed-off guy, so I'm not good at doing this. I should be better. But our communities are super important because, I mean, that's one of the things in the early days of America that the Europeans noticed about us was that our our free associations are actually what are part of what makes us stronger, because when the government is basically an association. And so an association creates a center of power. And so when you freely associate, what you're doing is you're creating a new center of power.
Right.
That's not controlled by the government.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so, the most important center of power is the family. Those are, because people don't realize that what you get with a family is you kind of get free power. You get a group of people who are naturally allied to each other. My next door neighbor, he might hate me or he might love me. My kids, even when they hate me, they love me.
Right.
So you have these natural bonds and these natural centers of power that occur, and we need to, if we're going to be serious about being a free people, we need to be strengthening and raising up these free centers of power that are separate from the government.
Yeah. Well, I think back when I was young, my mother had a sewing machine that was non-electric. Mm-hmm. It was a pedal machine. It was an old Singer. If I had that today, it'd be worth a fortune because it's an antique. Yeah. And she would mend or sew things. Now, that meant she was not consuming.
Right.
Now, she may have consumed some thread.
Right.
I mean, which was practically nothing. I recall, I actually have images of my mother sitting in the dining room, mending socks mm-hmm. by hand. My mother was not a consumer. Mm-hmm. My mother was a producer. Mm-hmm. Now, she didn't drive. She didn't have a driver's license. She never got behind the wheel of a car. My father always drove. She never wanted to drive. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting that there was a separation of responsibility. That wasn't dictated. It was a natural thing. Right. And it worked perfectly fine. When my mother wanted to manage the home, mm-hmm. my father managed the business. They merged, and she helped with the business as well, and my father helped with the home as well. And it was really a very harmonious mm-hmm. A lifestyle. A lot was done, but not much was consumed.
Right.
And it was so interesting. And when I think of the consumer today, where everything is so consumer-oriented, I can't watch television anymore because they're always trying to sell me something. We don't produce. We have to consume.
Yeah. And then the other side of that is that when, today what happens is that, you have both parents work, and then that means that both parents' work is taxed.
That's correct.
So, if you have one parent working, the other parent's work is not taxed.
That's correct.
And it's not that they're not doing work. It's not that they're not being productive. They actually might be being more productive.
Right.
But it's, if both parents work, and instead of the other parent raising the children, if you pay someone else to raise the children, and you pay someone to come in and help with your laundry or whatever, you are just being bled dry.
That's correct. And we're going to go off on a tangent. I know this. Folks, excuse me, But don't go away. Don't go away. Just hear me out. But my youngest son, he's 40-something years old. Young. They're still kids. At 45 years old, they're kids, like young punks. They just had a baby. Mm-hmm. And the baby's, I don't know how many weeks old, or a couple of months old. And he lives in Colorado. Been going crazy. They put their name on a waiting list to have someone watch their kid. So they can put their kid. Mm-hmm. And I didn't say anything. Right. Now, if he's listening to this, he's going to call me after this and tell me he disowns me as a father.
Yes.
But I'm saying, if you're going to have a baby, be a mother and a father. Mm-hmm. You have a baby. In fact, all my kids did this. They had babies. They had kids, and a month and a half later, or whatever the magic time is, bingo, it winds up in daycare with someone else raising the kid. Then both of them, either the mother or the father, are running around, dropping the kid off, mm-hmm. Going to work, worrying about whether or not the kid is being mm-hmm. abused, coming in. They're always leaving work early, always having a problem. The kid gets sick at the daycare. All the kids are now sick at the daycare. Now they got to stay home and I said, forget about the money. What kind of life is that?
Yeah.
You're not raising your own kids. You're running back and forth from work to daycare to work to home, back and forth. The logistics is impossible. I can't. How many times I receive a telephone call saying, "Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you pick up so-and-so?" This never happened before.
Yeah. Well,
And they think they're actually making money because they have two incomes. I said, don't you guys know that you're spending more? But see, once you get in there, then you're telling people how to run their lives, and they go, who are you to tell me how to run my life? Then you get an argument. So you keep your mouth shut, you pick up the kid, you do whatever you have to do, you go home and you say, I want to forget this situation. I don't want to forget it exists.
And you know, I want to say that there's some people who are stuck in that situation, and,
Right.
and I don't want to criticize that.
Yeah.
But the you know, I don't have people who come and blow my nose for me. I don't have people who go home and kiss my wife for me. You know, there are things that we do as humans that are kind of ours. You know, and I think it's kind of problematic when we just start outsourcing. You know, I'm actually a fan of outsourcing just in general. I think that, you know, if the people in India do a great job at something,
Right, I agree.
Then let's let them do it.
Right.
But I'm not going to outsource an Indian to come home and kiss my wife for me.
That's right.
You know, I think that's where you're like, well, as a human, you know, there are things that make me human.
Yeah.
And I think I should continue doing those things.
Yeah.
And just outsourcing them just seems a very odd thing. You know, the people in the daycare, you can't outsource motherhood and fatherhood even to a daycare center.
Yeah. Well, you know, well, let's stop for we're past due on station identification. Folks, do not go away. I forbid you to do that. Okay? Hold on a second, and we'll stop for our real quick break. Hello, everybody.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective, not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, we're back. This morning we have in our studio Jonathan Bartlett, author of the book Secession. And we're sort of skirting around the issue a lot. We're getting away from the book, but we're talking about the principles of secession. And we just finished talking about how people have become so dependent. I guess we're talking about dependency of the system, you know, and how families have broken up and how they abdicate actually the responsibility of raising their kids by giving them to a daycare center, and people don't make anything themselves. In fact, if you want to follow that trend of thinking, we don't cook anymore. I mean, we make sure we have the best stove that has all the gizmos in it, but then we go out to eat at McDonald's, wherever, you know, or to a place to eat. We don't eat. We don't stay home. We don't cook anymore.
Well, I will say that in Oklahoma, where I'm from, is that we've actually done a lot in the law to actually help us out as far as being home producers. There's a lot of places around the country where if you cook things at home, you can't give them away. And have you heard of those strange laws where like bake sales are banned in some places,
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's some places where the cops will literally raid you if you try to do a bake sale.
Can you imagine?
I know.
Could you imagine all the guys in their uniforms?
Exactly.
AK-47s or whatever they carry, AR-15, of course you have a bake sale.
Yeah.
With these vests on and these tanks coming down the street. Why? Marianne is selling some chocolate cake.
Yeah. Well, but in all honesty, that's actually probably one of the biggest threats to the system.
Yeah.
I mean, and so so one of the goals of kind of the first part of the book is to help you understand how you can move from being a consumer to being a producer.
Right.
And so, and one of the things in Oklahoma that's great is that we actually recently passed, in the last year or so, a Home Bakery Act. And so you don't need a commercial kitchen. You can actually produce things in your home and sell them without anybody's permission. And I think there's like a cap of $20,000 a year. And after that, you need to do licensing and all that kind of stuff. But I've actually been working on on trying to do that with my kids too. We've been making a homemade vanilla extract. We've been making lotions and stuff like that. And started out, we gave it away as Christmas gifts, because rather than trying to buy things for everybody, we've got a lot of family in town. So if we tried to buy something for everybody, we would be broke. That would be all that I wouldn't feed my children. I just buy people Christmas gifts. So instead, what we do is my wife bakes cookies. Me and the boys, we make lotions. We make vanilla extract. We make a few other things. One year, I actually grew peppermint leaves in my garden, and we cut those, and we made peppermint tea bags for everybody, and so this mode of production in the home.
Right.
And it's also something to teach your children, because we have to renew liberty every generation. It just doesn't come naturally.
That's right. Good point.
And so teaching your kids to be able to take the raw materials and produce something better, and to produce create value along the way. And that's the goal of the first part of my book, is showing how you create value in your home, and then from there it moves on, and how do you keep value? How do you store value? Now, we're used to storing value by putting your money in stocks and bonds and things like that. And that's, honestly, I would view that as a better way of doing things if we could trust everybody.
Right.
Because there's something beautiful about having my savings being someone else's business.
Right.
There's something really, truly beautiful about that. The problem is that we're the people who run the financial sector are largely a bunch of schmucks, and I don't trust them at all. And
well, the system, the financial system is corrupt. I hate to, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is pertinent in that there's a fellow that I know. His name is Kevin Freeman, and he wrote a book on this very subject. In fact, he was on television just a couple of days ago. I turned TV. He was on television with Jim Ricketts,
mm-hmm.
and Kevin wrote business models for Sir John Templeton. He's
mm-hmm.
a smart guy.
Yeah.
And he wrote this book, and I want to mention the name of the book, and I cannot remember the name. Title. Is
it like Currency Wars or?
No, that's Jim Ricketts' book. Currency Wars and the Death of the Dollar.
But Kevin Freeman, his book is on financial attacks.
That's right, yeah. And he talks about all the varieties within the financial system, and he takes every facet of it. And when you read that book, you realize putting your money in the financial system is like putting it in fire, mm-hmm. like putting it in a furnace. I mean, it goes, it's gone. If you get it back, you're going to be incredibly fortunate in a way. Now, there are many people who do make money, but a lot of people don't realize long term they're not going to make anything at all. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's too easy for the whole system to collapse. And he goes through about 50 ways in which it can collapse. And all of it's very real. Mm-hmm. That's been happening, by the way. So you're right, putting money in the financial system is very, very risky. Even if you're putting it into a big blue chip company, mm-hmm. it's the system that's risky. It's not the company itself.
Yeah, and so there's things that you can do in your home that you can put your money into that will generate long-term value. If you kind of the easiest one is buying silver. because
Right.
silver has an intrinsic value.
Right.
People have used silver. If I went back 3,000 years, I could take my American Silver Eagle and still buy something with it.
Right.
And I presume that if I go 3,000 years in the future, I can take my American Silver Eagle and still buy something with it.
Right.
And so you have a store of value that's actually real. And then there's other ways to do it too. You can food storage. If you buy food for the future, you're helping yourself out in two ways. First of all, you're storing your value, and you're preparing yourself in case of any problems. And I think we've gotten too used to our wealth. The fact that there's a grocery store full of food is a byproduct of the fact that we're very wealthy. And the fact is that life doesn't hold that forever. And it's great that we have that ability, but on the other hand, we need to just, even if I trusted the financial system totally, we should still, in our homes, have stores of food and the things that we need, just in case something goes wrong. I mean,
Right.
you don't have to be awaiting the next apocalypse to realize, even let's say you lose your job, okay? Wouldn't it be nice if you lost your job to be able to say, you know what, we don't need to buy food for the next 3 months because we've got it in the garage, And so it's just storing food and doing that sort of things, you can create value in your own home. And so I think that's an important thing is to build up locally, because if I invest in a company way far away, I'm building up that company.
Right.
And if you were to invest, I would think a nice way to invest would be to invest in companies in your own community.
Right.
And just build up from the ground up the economy, and that makes it. I actually think that even makes the national economy stronger when each local economy is strong in and of itself.
Well, yeah, the economy is stronger, but the government loses power.
Yes.
That's the problem. So they can't start wars because they don't have the money or the resources to do it, because the resources are with the people.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the resources are with the government, and the people don't have them. I mean, just think for a second. If, in fact, you had all your life, you always bought a little extra food,
Mm-hmm.
and some food lasts forever. You can get wheat, for example, and certain grains in canisters that are airtight. Last 25 years would be just as good,
Yep.
and you could live off of it. Let's assume that you did that over a long-term period of time, and you had a good storage of food where you could live for, take whatever months or years with that food.
Right.
And let's assume for a second that you actually paid off your house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may have to pay some taxes and stuff like that, and you rode around in an old car where you had no payments,
Right.
and you lost your job.
Right.
Who cares?
Exactly.
I mean, you really are. You become independent, but yet, what the images that are shown on television is the person who is independent is the person with the brand new car that costs $65,000, driving down, by the way, Broadway in New York with no other cars on the road, which I've never seen, you know, and with every beautiful girl hanging around the street corners, with what they're doing there, I don't know, but they're all looking at him because he's driving this Porsche or whatever, and that. We conjure up the image of independence. Look who I am. Mm-hmm. When in fact that's entrapment. Mm-hmm. And here we go back to the full circle. He's the consumer, and he's not the producer. Mm-hmm. No one is a producer. Everyone is the consumer. Mm-hmm. And I saw an ad the other day for a car. It wasn't a fancy car. It was one of the major manufacturers. And they had like 5 zeros on it. I don't know. It said 0 down. 0 interest, 0 payments for 3 months, 0 maintenance for a year or whatever. 5 zeros.
Right.
In other words, everything's free.
Yeah.
All you had to do is become a consumer.
Yep.
Now, little do they know that should they miss one payment by one day, that free gets to be 14 to 24% interest,
right.
And they will be in chains for the rest of their life. And how many people are going to go 6 or 7 year car loans and never missing one day?
Right.
not going to happen. You know, and we become entrapped by this, by these images on television, and we become more dependent on the system. Then when we get really entrapped and desperate, who do we go to? We go then to the government to bail us out, and we entrap ourselves even further. So we get further and further away from micro-secession. We keep on getting away from that.
Yeah. The other thing is that, you know, when you go to the government for help, the government, they are not even legally able to give you the help that you need. When, you know, my family has gone through a variety of disasters. We seem to have, disaster seems to just follow us. But what's always been there with us are our friends, and mostly the church. And the, you know, when I had a son who was dying in the hospital, we had, you know, we homeschool, and we had friends in our homeschool community and in our church community who would, so my wife would spend the entire day in the hospital with my son, and so the other members of our church would come to our house and watch our children for us. And, you know, it's if I were to imagine a government program for that, you know, it would be, you know, babysitter vouchers or something like that.
Right.
And there is a complete difference between what happens if I have a babysitting service versus my friends taking care of me. Those are, you know, it may be that there's some days when my friends need to hire the babysitting service because they can't do it. But in general, you know, having your friends take care of you is just an entirely different way of doing things. They can do things for you. They can, you know, my friends can raise my children spiritually and morally in my absence. The government is not even allowed to do that.
That's correct.
And so, you know, there's obviously people who don't have that, but I think that's what we need to build. Now, part of that is also that you know, my friends who are able to do that, they can only do that because they have put enough margin in their lives and in their homes to be able to do that. And that's something that I think we also miss, is that we're always trying to fill every single nook and cranny. And so when something comes along, when your friends need help, you can't be there for them. And I think what we need to do is, rather than giving money to the government to be there for our friends, we just need to be there for our friends.
Right. And it's not taxed.
Right, exactly.
Here we go back, we go full circle. By the way, folks, we still have a few more minutes. If you want to call and ask a question or make a comment, it's toll free, 888-773-4496, or our regular phone number is 646-652-4620. Our lines are open. Don't be afraid to, you're not going to be interrupting. Please just give us a call if you show up, and press the one button, and that'll tell me that you want to ask a question or make a comment. Now, what's the bottom line of your, boy, this microphone is very sensitive. What's the bottom line of your book?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is that there's you know, we can be more independent today by us doing things, and we can, and there are things that we can do. We don't have to wait for the election. We don't have to, you know, the election results, they matter, but they don't matter that much. What we do with each other and for each other, we can create community, we can create value, we can protect ourselves, we can educate the next generation. We don't need someone's permission to do any of these things. We all seem to be just kind of waiting for someone to give us permission to do the right thing. You don't need to wait, you know, Joe, you don't need my permission to do what's right for other people.
Right.
And you know, that's one thing, like there's a lot of poor communities. I think one thing that they miss is that there are things that they can do. I think that what the left has taught them is that they need to wait for the left to do something for them.
Right.
And I think that's actually one of the most disempowering things you can do for someone. And instead, because I think there are a lot of things, you know, I get that if you're poor, your options are a lot more limited. I mean,
Right.
You know, we get used to having lots of options, and when you're poor, your options are much more limited. Nonetheless, there are things that you can do for each other. You know, if you are in a poor neighborhood, you know, if you find the other people of goodwill in your neighborhood, you can stop crime in your own neighborhood. If the police are corrupt or bad or whatever, you can do it yourselves.
And just by virtue of the fact that people get to know that there is a crime-stopping type of program in a neighborhood by the people, crime would be subdued right then and there, because people say, if I go in there, there's going to be somebody carrying a 9mm to blow my head off.
Right.
I'll go someplace else.
Yeah, or even if they just had sticks. I mean,
right. Well, whatever.
You can defend yourself with a large stick.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, you know, it doesn't take money. It takes people who are willing and have the foresight. And I think that's one of the things, you know, it's good to have compassion for the poor, but I think we can also put that into overdrive and forget that if they can do it for themselves, then they can, you know, they can generate their own value. Sure, we absolutely should help people who are in need all the time. But the people, you know, in these communities, they can also help themselves out by helping each other out.
Right. But you know, we're all poor. I mean, I looked up how much my wife and I owe the government because of long-term unfunded liabilities. And the lowest figure, it can go from this figure to double this figure. My wife and I owe $997,232.
Yeah.
Now that's the bill
Yeah.
that we owe because the government spent our future money.
Yeah.
So if I consider myself, well, I'm well-to-do. No, I'm broke.
Yeah.
The government just broke me. Now, if you take the figures according to Professor Kutlikoff of the University of Boston, it's something like a little over $2 million. Well, now it's all over. You know, I'm sunk. And we don't realize how indebted we are, how broke we are, but we're spiritually broke, and we are culturally broke. And this bothers me, is that when I say spiritually, I don't mean you have to belong to this religion or that religion, but a spirit inside. And we seem to have lost so much of that. And I see this in my kids. They have so much less of that thought process that I do. And now they don't argue with me too much about it, but they don't follow through on it as much. You know, I still ride around in a car that has 283,000 miles on it, an old Subaru. And I keep on saying, but it runs. They said, but Dad, you can afford to buy any car. I said, hey, I can't afford a car. I owe the government $2 million. You see?
Yeah.
So that's just where we are. And we don't realize how impoverished we are as a people today. But we're impoverished not only physically, financially, but also spiritually. And when I say spiritually, I mean in the broadest sense. You know, and we're also impoverished in a humanistic point of view, where I live in a neighborhood for 41 years. I don't know any of my neighbors. I lived in Harlem. I knew everybody. Everybody, you know. In Harlem, you know, I mean, I was the East Side boy in Harlem. I knew everybody. Everyone took care of one another, including the mafioso. You know, they took care of everyone. If you had trouble, you always know you went to Louis. He took care of everybody, you know. But, I mean, there was this sense of community. There is no sense of, I hate suburbia. You know, I told my wife either I want to live in Bull Moose country or I want to live in a red brick district, because there's more community in both places. There's more community than you find in suburbia.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I wouldn't know much about the red brick district, but I do know that at least in my own area of town, you know, I know the people who are directly next to me, and that's about it. You know, I know the people across the street, catty corner, and that's pretty much it. We don't have community barbecues. We don't, and you know, I have to say that's my fault. I mean and I think we each have to own up to that. You know, that's my fault. I can do that. There's nothing preventing me tomorrow from sticking my barbecue out in the middle of the street and saying, "Hey guys, let's all eat." And so, I think that's, you know, when the bill comes due, you know, we all owe however much money it is. the bill will come due someday.
Oh, yes, and we're coming to that point, I think. I mean, there's a lot of people say 2015 may be the corner.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's going to be this year or if it's going to be 10 years or if it's going to be 20. I don't know. People, for some reason, keep loaning us money. I haven't figured that out, but they do. But someday the bill is going to come due.
Right.
And when that happens, we'd better be strong enough internally or we're not going to survive it. Now, I don't mean that necessarily we'll be dead, but we're not going to be a country. We're not going to be a free people. I mean, that's kind of what happened in Germany. I mean, people hate when people bring up Hitler's Germany, but that's really, I mean, that's not the reason. That's not an unusual place. That's happening all over the world actually right now. That's happened in Somalia. That's happened in all sorts of places. When you have a community that breaks down, it gets taken over by some sort of dictator.
Well, look at the city of Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's basically been taken over by the government because everyone gave up on Detroit.
Mm-hmm. And so that could happen all across the U.S.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily that we're all going to die, but it's that we're if we are not strong internally, then that means that we're going to require some sort of external strength. And though we don't really want that, I can let you know ahead of time that's never good. I mean, even sometimes a society needs it because they are so weak internally, but it's never a good thing.
Right. If everyone took care of their own,
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was relatively self-sufficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed that you were divorcing yourself from society, but in fact you'd feel more comfortable within society if everyone was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because there would be something in common that you would have,
Mm-hmm.
and not everyone has 100% of everything that they need. One person next door may be a carpenter. The guy on the other side may be an auto mechanic. You may be an electrician, or whatever the case may be, or know something about electronics. I'm a dumb talk show host. Everyone has their own talents and foibles or whatever. But as a result of that, people recognize that and they coalesce and they get together and they say, hey, as a group, we can do absolutely anything.
Mm-hmm.
Anything, because we have all the talent in the world. Now, we may have a little bit of a problem getting some of the natural resources, but we can work that out. But right now, it seems that everyone goes their own way. Recently, there was a movement, and it passed, unfortunately, to put speed humps in my neighborhood. I hate speed humps.
Yeah.
I said, why don't you put them on the highway so we go slower, Now, here was my point. Now, what I did do is I missed my mark because I actually missed the main meeting where people got up and gave talks about it, and I had a speech that would beat the band. And what happened, I was busy, and I missed the meeting, and I would never forgive myself for that. And it passed, and it's only going to cost us $75,000 to put these stupid things in. If you go in my neighborhood, drive around all day long in my entire neighborhood, which is Forest Creek, right? I'll bet you will have difficulty finding one kid on the street.
Yeah.
Now, just think about that. No kids are on the street. What are kids doing today? They're home playing games, In the summertime, kids are out of school. I'll go outside, never see a kid on the street. Never see him roller skating. Well, heck, in Harlem, I used to roller skate in Harlem.
Yeah.
But you never see the kids anymore. But yet we're spending $75,000 on speed humps. And I'll be very honest with you, I have never seen a car speed in my neighborhood. Now, maybe instead of going 25, they're going 30 or something, maybe.
Right.
But I've never seen people drag racing. Where I used to come from, let me tell you, 90 miles an hour was slow, but we had no speed humps.
Yeah.
And the question I wanted to ask them is, how many children got killed in the past year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the answer is 0.
Right.
How many children were killed in the past 5 years, by car, from speeding cars?
Or even
0.
injured.
Yeah, right. 0, right? And then how many kids, since the inception of this development, were hit by a car? And then there probably was some. But was the car speeding? Or did the kid just run out? I know a good friend of mine actually killed a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she lives with this
Yeah.
thing, But she was driving along, wasn't speeding, was nothing wrong. Kid just ran right in front of a car, smack. And I mean, she lives with this curse on her, and it wasn't her fault.
Right.
Now, would a speed hump would have helped them? So I'm saying we're always looking externally instead of internally looking at ourselves and our neighborhood and say, what's the best for the neighborhood? No, we go to the city. The city's going to do something to make the neighborhood better. It makes no sense at all. I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's the same.
I think that's completely real, because there's a great website called Free Range Kids, and it's talking about we're always worried about these external threats, and really, if we spend our entire lives living in fear, are we really free if we spend the entire time living in fear? Now and this may just be an excuse. I live in fear more than most people because I've lost 2 kids from diseases. So I'm probably more protective of my kids than I might recommend to other people. But nonetheless, I think that if we spend our entire lives living in fear, then we're not going to have freedom. I mean that's what it's not going to be free. Even our freedom won't be free if that's the way we do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was brought up in Harlem, East Harlem, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, just tough neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
I walked 5-6 blocks to school by myself, or with friends, whoever was in the right. Now with a lot of people on the street, but yet I live in this nice neighborhood, 0 crime, right? And the kids don't even take the bus. The mothers take the kids in their SUVs and they stand on line. They block up traffic for a half hour, dropping their kids off.
Yeah.
And I think the society has gone. We're just nuts.
Right.
I mean, I'd say, Johnny, get out your roller skates and get to work, get to school. Now, if I was concerned, I'd say, Johnny, you go with Peter and Mary and Agnes or whatever, and you walk together. Yeah. And if you were really paranoid, give them a cell phone, which I wouldn't want to do because I don't want them to get hooked on it. But we don't do that anymore. It's everyone's individually driving out. When I pass the school, which I never pass the school during, when they're dropping that time, because
you'd never get past there.
You can't get past it. I mean, if you go in the opposite direction, you get held up, and you'll see a line of cars for a half a mile, and they're all these 5,000-pound SUVs carrying what?
Yeah.
A 45-pound kid. Think about that. I think you got a $5,000 car carrying a 50-pound kid. There's something wrong with our society. We just have everything everything is distorted. Maybe a 5,000-pound kid should be carrying around a 50-pound car. But we have it all backwards. I'm going off on a tangent again because I rant about this all the time because I don't like what we're doing, but I like what you've done with your book and folks. The book is Secession. It's by Jonathan Bartlett. Simple ways to liberate yourself, your family, your community from government idiocy. And it is government idiocy because we didn't think of all these programs ourselves, but the government sure did because it makes them feel more important. It makes us more aligned with them and makes them, of course, makes us dependent on government. Now, before we're almost out of time now, what are the closing comments on this process of secession? How would you close this out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'll close kind of how we started in saying that you don't have to wait. You don't have to. It's not the election that will save you. There are things that you can do. You should be looking for things that you can do today to be more free, to be more secure in your persons. You should be looking for these things. And then now, when you do go and want to participate in elections and government, what you should be doing is you should be looking at ways that we can be empowering people to be more free, not ways that we can just give people things. But there's reasons for having laws about food quality and stuff like that, but they get less and less as you get more. I don't need a law to tell me not to poison my next door neighbor. I might need a law to tell me not to poison some guy from Massachusetts I don't know who purchased my product off of eBay.
Right.
And so as you get closer and closer and closer together, we need to relax the laws more and more and more, because when you are in community with someone, then you have intrinsic reasons not to harm them. And so, so I that's one thing that I advocate in my book, is that we need to be delegating power down. The families need more power. The communities need more power. The cities need more power. Instead, everyone seems to be pushing power up.
That's correct, yeah.
And what they'll do is they'll use the excuse that, some city or some family is abusing their power. And so so the solution is to give power to the most abusive part of government. And, that's not my thinking, and I'm not quite sure what other people are thinking when they think to do that. But it's like, there's that they feel that if they find, people are always worried about homeschoolers, and what we're doing to our children. And the fact that on average homeschoolers do a lot better doesn't seem to faze anybody.
Absolutely.
And that, I'm sure that there's some homeschooling family out there that's doing evil things to their children. But the solution to that is not to force all homeschoolers to send their kids to public schools. The solution is to give more power to local communities and local people. There's going to be bad apples. I can't get rid of them for you. I really can't. I wish I could, but if you think that giving the power to the government is going to get rid of the bad apples, it's not. It's just going to give the bad apples more power.
Right, and the apples will get bigger.
Yeah. And so I'm fully happy thinking that in any government program, the first person to run it is a perfectly legitimate person. But once you have power somewhere, then the people who aren't legitimate are going to say, oh, look, right, there's a giant, I don't even have to work to get that power. I can just get it automatically. And so, that's the nice thing about having power distributed, is that, if the power was in the families, if someone wanted to do something really evil, they'd have to convince each family to do it.
Right.
But if you put the power in the national government,
it's across the board.
Yeah. Right. You only have to change out one position, and you've got it.
Yeah. Well, people don't realize that when they give the power to the people in government will create laws consistent with the wishes of those people who have contributed the most to their campaign. Mm-hmm. No one's going to give somebody $50,000 or $100,000 to a congressman or to a senator or anyone, and then they're going to vote against their wishes. So no matter what they say, it's the old-fashioned, just follow the money, and you'll find out why laws are passed.
Yeah, and it's
we just don't have the money. Excuse me, we just don't have the money for it. I can't give $100,000 to a senator to ensure that he doesn't pass a law that I think is egregious.
Yeah, no, and I've got friends who've been kind of shocked by the political process, that they literally walk into their senator's office and say, I'd like this change to a bill, and they're a supporter of the senator, and the senator just literally goes in and marks it on the bill and gives it to his secretary, and that's, there's no process of thinking, is this the best law? It's like, oh, well, one of my constituents wants it, we'll write it in,
right,
and it's whoever made the noise, we're just going to write their stuff into law, and that's the end.
What I love is when you hear, we have to go now, but one other comment. I love when you hear a congressman say, oh yes, the bill was put on my desk yesterday, we've been reviewing it, and the bill is 2,100 pages long.
Yeah.
I can't read a 200-page book in one day, and they got 2,100 pages of legalese with small print, and they're going to review that and vote on it, 20 hours later.
Right.
All right, with that comment, folks, buy the book, as they say. It's Secession. Author Jonathan Bartlett, our guest here. Simple ways to liberate yourself, your family, and your community from government idiocy. Jonathan, thank you so much for being our guest this morning. We're going to close out this program, and I hope you do will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is a great program.
Great. Thank you so much. And now, here we go. Let's see if everything works properly so we can end the program. Here we go. Somehow this should work. This is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, but let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano, Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.